I think it's a great question because we got to be wondering, why are these things even in our lives in the first place, and are they playing a good role? And I'd say that yes, those things are accomplished, but I want to offer some clarification on Swedenborg's view on exactly how we get from sufferings to purifications. It's not like God is sitting there and saying, you need a little bit of suffering, toughen you up and get you to be worthy of my love or something like that. There have been traditions that sort of think that's a part of it. You need to feel the pain of suffering. It's not like somehow agony purifies, that it's something that hurts. Like if you stub your toe, that's a purification. Pain is only a last resort. Any kind of pain, psychological pain, emotional pain, it's a last resort, only just as much as can be helpful or useful is applied. And it's not that God is applying suffering, but that the spiritual struggles we go through, where we are rejecting anything that used to be part of us that's negative or destructive, to do that, to move from having the previous will that we all start out with of self-centeredness, materialism, those sorts of things, into this will of universal mutual love, that's a painful process. And you might liken it to exercise, or on a grander scale, giving birth, that there are pains attended just because of the magnitude of what's happening. But I want to say that it's not the suffering, it's the learning, it's what comes out of it, it's the humility, and it's also, though, some of it is about suffering. We have certain concepts that we're attached to, but if there's enough, those concepts cause enough suffering that we actually feel, we're more able to, sorry, my phone just dinged, we're more able to reject those, because we see finally the issues that those cause. Swedenborg says the only way that we grow is through what he calls spiritual temptations. So these are combats of the spirit, and they do manifest as distress and those sorts of things. But all that they do is present an opportunity. It's not that everything painful that anyone goes through automatically makes you grow spiritually. Sometimes it just stops you from doing something worse. But if we are learning the true nature of our connection to God, are gaining some humility, some dependence through difficult things, then, yeah, there can be a spiritual component to it. Swedenborg says that in those states of temptation and spiritual despair, it seems like God is absent. Like there's no God, and certainly not a benevolent, present God. But he says, then God is closer than we could ever believe. So there's something about, we go through this process together, even if it doesn't feel like it. There's the Footprints poem a lot of people reference to get at that concept. And there's something to this going through ordeals and overcoming them. Jesus Christ, that his suffering on the cross, Swedenborg says, was sort of the ultimate example of this. It's not because the suffering is good, but it's about that you love something enough that you're willing to undergo the chaos that you have to feel to get through it. In conclusion, I mean, it's such a broad topic and it's so meaningful that I say depends on how you're asking the question. But in general, the things that are allowed to happen in life are only allowed to happen if some kind of good can come out of it. And if we're willing to approach suffering, and suffering is tough stuff, so it's not always easy to do this, but the more we're willing to approach it as an opportunity to strengthen our belief that God is working through it, even if it doesn't feel like it, as an opportunity to try to solidify ourselves in particular truths, like even though this seems like it's falling apart, I'm going to trust that God is doing something with it, or even just realizing our dependence on God and the need for help, that can be used to advance spiritually. And I'm sure that God doesn't like it when we're suffering. I mean, that's a given. You think about if you're a parent or you have somebody that you really care about, you don't want to see them suffer, and that's exponentially greater with God. But think about the joy of, okay, we've got this hard thing here now, but this is going to lead you one step closer to heaven if we go at this the right way. And that heaven is eventually this rest from these kinds of sufferings and into the eternal joy. It's with variation, but so much happier than we have it here, that was God's original plan for the human race. So if you're sitting there saying, is anything coming out of this stuff that I'm going through? Yes, it's not that God is sitting there here's a hard thing, have that, but it is the divine working with the worst things life can throw at us to bring us closer, and something good can come out of everything. That's the core of providence. So again, I feel like it's an inadequate answer because it's such a big question, but those are a couple of my thoughts. Thanks so much for asking.